Washington Journal continues.
Jessica Anderson is with us. She is the president of the Sentinel Action Fund. She's also the executive director of Heritage Action for America. We're here to talk about the status of the debt ceiling debate and other political issues of the morning. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about the Sentinel Action Fund. What is the purpose of that fund?
So we get involved directly to support conservative candidates in elections. We look at the Senate, we look at the House. We obviously know there's a lot at stake when we look at the 2024 map. And so we support the candidates that are battle-tested conservatives, ready to lead, ready to tackle the issues of the day. And that's backed up by our work at Heritage Action, which is the largest grassroots organization and advocacy organization in the country, again, focused on conservative, right-of-center issues.
So roughly how many candidates in 2024 do you think the Sentinel Action Fund will support?
That's a great question, because the map is really just now starting to shake out. You've got some really important Republican Senate seats to hold, like Senator Rick Scott in Florida will definitely want to support him. Senator Ted Cruz in Texas will want to support him. And then you've got some interesting seats where we're going to see probably in the next 6 to 8 months how those begin to shake out. Montana is one, a potential pickup for Republicans. West Virginia, we're obviously all watching to see what Senator Manchin does. Does he stay, or does it open it up for Mr. Mooney or Mr. Justice to jump in West Virginia Senate? Ohio, Indiana, Jim Banks is running. So we'll probably land somewhere between 6 to 12 races that we get involved in. But as the map shakes out, a lot of that will be more clear. And certainly as voters begin to weigh in through the primary season beginning early next year.
And you also weigh in on House races as well, correct?
We do, and the margins in the House for Republicans are the tightest that they have been in decades, and so there's going to be a lot of attention on ensuring that Republicans maintain control of the House and hopefully grow that margin of support under Speaker McCarthy and actually allow a more comfortable majority to get the things done that are needed to turn the country around, and hopefully that's done in concert with a Republican-controlled Senate.
Well, what in your view, given the current debt debate and the looming potential debt ceiling crisis or default, what in your view do Republicans have to do to strengthen their base in the House and broaden out to other candidates to build that majority? Yeah,
we're actually already starting to see that sort of leadership. You look at Speaker McCarthy and you see his polling just 4 months ago. He was underwater with a lot of Republican voters. I saw a poll just yesterday. He's up 25 points because he's simply doing what he said he would do in the leadership and following through on the commitment to America, which was the campaign pledge from last year. And so when you see Republicans actually leading, tackling tough issues like the debt, like the border, putting forward common sense plans, that actually begins to attract voters to say, hey, these guys are doing what they said they would. They're fighting for me. And they're doing it in the face of what we believe are very radical positions that are coming out of the left right now. And that culture clash is happening not only in our families, our communities, when we look at commerce and businesses, but also here in Washington.
The president is out of town for the G7, but will be returning from that Asia trip earlier. Politico writes that the president is giving his clearest indication to date he's willing to make a critical debt ceiling compromise. The president has downplayed his embrace of work requirements on government programs as modest, but his fellow Democrats have already warned against it. Do you think that's one of those red line items for Republicans?
So it's nice to see the president come to the table. Where he started this conversation months ago was no negotiations, and we're going to have a clean hike in the debt ceiling. We obviously know that that's reckless, and it's certainly not possible when you look at the makeup of the House and Senate in Washington. So the fact that he's coming to the table, that he's interested in looking at the Republican House pass package on the debt that McCarthy shepherded through is a positive sign. Now they've got to get in the room and actually hash this out. I do think work requirements will end up being a red line. I think what sort of cuts on the domestic and discretionary programs will end up being a red line for discussion. And then remember, McCarthy's got a really challenging role here because he's got the conservative part of the party that committed to those FY22 spending levels, how that butts up with Democrats who want to increase discretionary spending without any cuts is going to be the problem, I think, of today. Speaker McCarthy had a similar comment yesterday. He felt like with the president, they were getting closer. That's the closest they've been in weeks. So I would watch this weekend, and hopefully we'll have a deal early next week.
A challenge for House Republicans is Senate Republicans, what the Senate will do. In a piece that was published at Heritage Action, the Limit, Save, and Grow Act, you call for passing the House. The House has passed the measure.
That's right.
And you're calling on the Senate to do that as well. But how likely is that?
It depends on how the next few days of negotiations go. You've seen Senator Rick Scott, Ted Cruz, other really strong conservatives out there leading in the Senate, Mike Lee in particular, putting together a letter that mirrored almost exactly verbatim what the House passed debt package encompassed. So now you've got nearly all senators on the Republican side supporting that. The question is can they pull over Sinema? Can they pull over Manchin? And then you have enough to actually pass this package. That's going to be on them. The House did their part, and now there's going to have to be some form of agreement in the Senate.
Our guest, Jessica Anderson with Heritage Action. She's also president of the Sentinel Fund, the Political Action Fund, and we welcome your calls and comments at 202-748-8000. That's the Democrats' line. 202-748-8001 is the Republican line, and 202-748-8002 is the line for independents and all others. In general, what's your view of the cliffs we come to in these debt ceiling issues?
Well, they certainly get the public's attention, right? You actually begin to have a conversation about what are the things that you want our government, our American government, to be spending money on. Is it woke programs? Is it education? Is it defense? Is it healthcare? And so when you have these big major cliffs that happen, they really cause voters to pay attention, maybe outside the political cycle. You know, as we talked about at the beginning, politics in earnest really begins at the end of this year as we head into 24, but people are talking now about the issues. I mean, we've got record inflation, huge hikes in mortgage rates. Unemployment obviously is starting to bounce back, but a lot of that are jobs lost from COVID. And so you've got an economically depressed country that now is looking at, okay, we have a debt ceiling cliff ahead of us. What's going to happen to my family? Am I going to be able to afford my groceries, to send my kids to school, summer camps, whatever it looks like in their stage of life? And so it's a great opportunity, I think, for Americans to weigh in, to call their member of Congress, to encourage them to be serious about the debt, to get a deal together, not to allow, government shutdowns, but to actually allow a concerted effort to cut spending, have some actual hard looks at what our defense budget is doing, what it shouldn't be doing, how it adapts to the threats internationally of today. And those are the conversations that I see traveling the country as part of the grassroots, working with candidates. And a lot of people are eager to get this right, not only right now, but as the baseline for how we head into 2024.
Is anybody over there or out there in favor of seeing this country default on its debt?
No, it's such a small sliver of people that actually are supporting that. Most people right now, they want to see the package that was passed in the House be taken up in the Senate and the lead in the negotiations. And the fact that President Biden has come to the table and is willing to negotiate with Speaker McCarthy, I think is a great first step, but they got to get it done. We don't have a ton of time, and that needs to be prioritized in the next 7 days.
Got several calls waiting, but I wanted to get your opinion on how things have gone at the U.S.-Mexico borders since the lifting of the Title 42 restrictions. Two different reportings on that. This is from the Los Angeles Times. Their headline, Why Border Crossings Have Fallen Since the Trump-Era Rules Expired Last Week. Also, the reporting this morning in the front page of the Washington Times, and I'll move that so that our viewers can see this as well. Their front page headline says, border agents release most migrants into the U.S., writing most illegal immigrants at the border are still being caught and released after the end of Title 42, according to numbers obtained by the Washington Times that challenge Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas's promises of consequences.
So Title 42 expired the day the Republican-controlled House passed H.R. 2. And that was a symbolic moment, but it was also incredibly rich with policy. This was the largest, most common sense and comprehensive border package that has passed to date in our country's history. It not only looked at things like the asylum process and how illegal immigrants are handled when they come to the border, but it looked specifically at the humanitarian crisis, how those that are coming across illegally are actually taken care of when they get here versus when they're seeking asylum and sending them back to their country of origin. All of that was at play at the border. And, you know, it's disappointing when you see liberal outlets try to cover over the problem. Anyone that's been to the border, anyone that's seen videos of the border knows how open it is, how porous it is, and how much of a humanitarian crisis it is. So the House was right to take this on. I'm grateful that they did. Chairman Mark Green and Chairman Jim Jordan actually led those processes, both through House Homeland and House Judiciary, to come to a very common sense conclusion about what our border security package needs to be. Now, does it go through the Senate? That's the next question. And at that point, does it become a rebuke to the Biden's approach to the border? I mean, Secretary Mayorkas has been on the Hill. He's been testifying. There's threats of impeachment. This is an issue that every single day Americans are dealing with. I heard just this morning Governor Abbott of Texas is sending another busload of immigrants from the border to a sanctuary city interior to the United States. This is not going away until we actually secure the border in a way as outlined, I think, in this House package. But then if the Senate takes it up and adds additional provisions, that's good too.